Love in Hip-Hop Atlanta has once again shattered the illusion of trust. And this time, the key to Kirk Frost's hidden life lies in the hands of Karlie Red. As the crew wrapped up a typical scene, no one could have predicted what was about to unfold. Karlie entered the room, not with her usual flair or humor, but with an unsettling calmness that sent a chill through the air. In her hand was a manila envelope, unassuming, plain, yet it held within it a truth that would change everything. The cast was unaware, but Karlie knew that this moment would be the one that defined her. She wasn't just here to cause drama. She was here to expose a truth too long buried. Her movements were deliberate as she walked to the middle of the room, her eyes locked onto the table where Kirk Frost sat. He noticed her approach but didn't move. The air was thick with anticipation as the rest of the cast members exchanged wary glances, sensing something big was coming. Karlie didn't hesitate. She placed the envelope on the table with such finality that the room seemed to hold its breath. The small thud of the envelope hitting the table echoed louder than anything else in the space. Even Bambi, usually quick with her words, covered her mouth with her hand in shock. And Rasheeda stood nearby, her face an unreadable mask, but her eyes spoke volumes. It was as if she knew, deep down, what was about to happen. But still couldn't quite believe it. The moment stretched out, the room frozen in place. Karlie didn't speak immediately. She simply opened the envelope, and the first document slipped out. The look on Rasheeda's face morphed from confusion to something much darker as she saw the picture that Karlie held up for everyone to see. The woman in the photo wasn't someone the cast recognized, but the body language between her and Kirk was undeniable, a closeness that screamed secrets. The silence in the room became suffocating as Rasheeda's hand went to her mouth, her eyes widening in disbelief. Karlie's voice broke the tension, low but steady. "This isn't just gossip. This is evidence." Her words hung in the air, heavy with truth. Rasheeda, who had been so composed just moments before, seemed to crumble in real time. Her legs wobbled, and she quickly blinked away the tears that were threatening to spill. The camera captured every moment, Rasheeda's hand flying to her mouth as the reality of what she was seeing took hold. Kirk remained silent, looking down at the table, his face clouded with guilt but saying nothing. It was as if he knew that no explanation he could offer would change what was already unfolding. Karlie didn't stop there. One by one, she laid out more documents, airline schedules that Kirk had never mentioned, printed screenshots of late-night text exchanges that hinted at clandestine meetings, and even hotel receipts obtained under false pretenses. Each document she laid on the table felt like a strike, each one building up the case against Kirk, a man who had spent years spinning lies and hiding secrets. And now, Karlie was dismantling it all. She didn't just lay them out. She walked through them, piece by piece, telling the room and the audience exactly what had been going on behind the scenes for so long. It was methodical, almost surgical in its precision. "I got these weeks ago," Karlie said, her voice calm but firm. "I held on to them, wondering if it was my place to reveal them. But after what happened last night, after seeing Rasheeda walk off the set in tears, I realized some things need to be revealed." The words hung in the air, and it was clear that Karlie wasn't just talking about the secrets she had uncovered. She was talking about herself, about the weight she had been carrying, and how she had finally decided to let it all come to light. Rasheeda, unable to hold back any longer, trembled as she blinked away the tears that filled her eyes. "What are you doing here, Karlie?" she asked, her voice shaking. It wasn't just a question. It was a plea, a desperate search for some kind of explanation, some kind of understanding. But Karlie didn't falter. She looked straight at Rasheeda and answered, simply, "Why now?" "Because you deserve to know." The tension in the room was palpable. The crew, the cast, everyone watching was caught in the gravity of the moment. For once, the drama wasn't scripted. It was raw, unfiltered, and real. And the most shocking part was that it wasn't just about the receipts. It was about the realization that everything Rasheeda had believed to be true was now in question. The lies had been so deeply embedded that they had become part of her reality. And now, Karlie had torn that reality apart with a single act. Karlie didn't stop. She continued to drop receipts, more pictures, more documents, more evidence that Kirk's life was not what he had led everyone to believe. Each document was like a dagger, piercing through the layers of lies he had built around himself. But it wasn't just the facts that hit hardest. It was the truth behind them. The realization that Kirk had been living a double life, one with Rasheeda and one that had existed in secret, was a bitter pill to swallow. Rasheeda's voice trembled as she looked at Karlie. "Why now? Why not give me these earlier?" she asked, her eyes searching Karlie's for some answer. Karlie didn't flinch, because you needed to feel it. You needed to see it for yourself. You needed the world to see it too, Karlie answered, her tone unrelenting. There was no sympathy in her words, only the cold truth. She wasn't here to make Rasheeda feel better. She was here to make sure the truth was exposed no matter how painful it was. As the camera captured the scene, the rest of the cast began to react. Bambi, who had been silent up until now, whispered, "This is a lot. This is too much to process." But Karlie wasn't backing down. She had waited too long for this moment. She wasn't going to let anyone try to shut her down now. The room felt heavy as everyone absorbed the truth. This wasn't just about a messy love triangle or a reality TV storyline. This was about lives, about the betrayal of trust, and about the truth finally coming to light. Kirk, still silent, looked around at the cast. His face was pale, his eyes shifting nervously as Karlie continued to expose him. It was clear that the man who had always prided himself on being able to talk his way out of any situation was now completely cornered. The receipts were undeniable. Rasheeda, tears now streaming down her face, turned to Kirk and said, "You lied to me. You lied to our kids." Her voice cracked with the weight of the words. And as she spoke, Karlie stood back, watching it all unfold. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She just watched as the truth took its toll. Kirk, now standing, tried to explain himself. His voice was low and filled with regret, but the words didn't come out right. He didn't know what to say. There was nothing he could say that would take away the pain in Rasheeda's eyes. Nothing he could do to erase the years of lies that had been exposed. He looked at Rasheeda, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm sorry," he said. "I never meant for things to go this far." But it was too late. The damage had been done. The truth was out, and there was no going back. Rasheeda collapsed to the ground, overcome with emotion. The cast, the crew, everyone was frozen in place, unsure of what to do. This wasn't just another scene for the cameras. This was real, and the raw emotion in the room was undeniable. As Karlie looked on, she knew that this was her moment. She had exposed the truth, and now, there was no turning back. The truth had come out. And the consequences were just beginning. As the heavy silence settled over the room, the consequences of Karlie's actions hung in the air, thick and undeniable. Kirk Frost, the man who had built an entire facade of family and loyalty, stood exposed to secrets now laid bare for everyone to see. The room, once filled with the usual chatter of castmates and crew members, had now become a battlefield, with only one thing on everyone's mind: the truth. And the truth, as Karlie had just made clear, was a devastating force that none of them were prepared for. Rasheeda, standing in the midst of this emotional wreckage, seemed to lose herself in the gravity of the moment. Her eyes, usually so full of life, were now clouded with a mixture of betrayal and heartbreak. She had trusted Kirk, loved him, stood by him through thick and thin. But now, in a single breath, all of that seemed meaningless. The lies, the deceit, the countless betrayals, had all been exposed in front of the very people who had watched her build her life with him. And for what? For secrets hidden behind closed doors? For a love that was only as real as the lies it was built upon? Rasheeda stood there, feeling as though the ground beneath her was crumbling. Each new document Karlie revealed, each fresh piece of evidence, hit harder than the last. Every photo, every text, every hotel receipt pulled her deeper into a nightmare she hadn't seen coming. How had she been so blind? How had she not seen what was right in front of her all this time? The years of doubts, the odd moments of distance, the things she'd brushed off suddenly, they all made sense. They all pointed to one painful truth. Kirk had been lying to her for far longer than she could have ever imagined. And yet, there was a part of Rasheeda that still couldn't let go of the years they had shared. There was still a flicker of hope deep inside her that the man she had loved for so long could somehow be redeemed, could somehow make it right. But, as she looked at the evidence before her, the evidence Karlie had laid out with such brutal clarity, that hope was quickly fading. How could she trust him again? How could she ever look at him the same way after everything that had come to light? Karlie, however, stood calm and unwavering. There was no gloating in her eyes, no joy in seeing Kirk crumble. She wasn't here to revel in the destruction she had caused. She was here to make sure that the truth would be heard, no matter the cost. She knew this moment would change everything. She knew that the fallout would be felt for seasons to come, but she also knew that this was a turning point, not just for her, but for everyone in the room. As she watched Kirk, his face contorted with regret, She knew there was nothing he could say to undo the damage. The truth was inescapable. There would be no more denying, no more deflecting. This was a reckoning. Rasheeda, who had always been the emotional pillar of the show, was no longer the woman who had supported her man unconditionally. She was broken. And it wasn't just the betrayal that hurt, it was the realization that everything she had believed in, everything she had worked for, had been a lie. Every time she had defended Kirk, every time she had brushed off the whispers of doubt, she had been wrong. And that truth cut deeper than anything Karlie could have dropped in those receipts. Kirk, for his part, stood motionless. His usual bravado was gone. The confident, cocky man who had sidestepped drama for years now looked like a man who had been caught in a trap of his own making. His hands, which had always been so steady, now trembled as he reached for his phone, desperately trying to salvage the situation. But there was no escaping the evidence. Every text, every receipt, every screenshot Karlie had laid before them was a testimony to the life he had been hiding, and no apology, no excuse, could erase the damage done. He glanced at Karlie, his eyes filled with something resembling desperation, but his words were slow, like they were struggling to come out. "I never wanted this to happen," he said. "I thought I could keep it all separate. I thought I could manage my mistakes without anyone finding out, but I was wrong. I thought I could handle it. I thought I could keep it under control." His words came out in a rush, but they lacked the conviction of someone who truly understood the damage he had caused. They sounded like excuses. They sounded like the last-ditch attempt of a man who had run out of lies to tell. Rasheeda's response was immediate and cutting. "You lied to me for years," she said, her voice low but firm. "You thought you could hide it from me. You thought I wouldn't find out. Well, now you're exposed, and there's no going back." She couldn't hold back the tears anymore. The years of pain, of betrayal, of holding everything inside, were coming out in a flood. And as she spoke, she felt a strange mix of relief and devastation. She was finally seeing the truth, but the truth came with a price she hadn't been prepared for. Karlie watched this unfold, her face impassive, but her eyes filled with a quiet understanding. This wasn't about her. This was about Rasheeda, about the woman who had been blindsided by a man she had trusted with everything. It was about exposing the lies that had kept Rasheeda in the dark for so long. The rest of the cast seemed frozen, in place, unsure of how to respond to what was unfolding before them. This wasn't the usual manufactured drama of reality TV. This was real. This was raw. This was the kind of moment that could change the entire dynamic of the show. Fans watching from home could feel the intensity of the situation, their emotions mirroring those of the cast. Social media was already ablaze with reactions, with everyone weighing in on who was right, who was wrong, and what the future would hold for these characters. But in that room, with the cameras rolling, there was no time for social media reactions. There was only the immediate aftermath of the truth being exposed. Kirk, unable to meet Rasheeda's gaze, looked at Karlie, his voice trembling as he spoke. "I'm sorry," he said. "I never meant for things to go this far." His apology was so empty, so hollow. His eyes darted between Karlie and Rasheeda, but the words didn't feel like they had any weight. He had made too many mistakes to expect forgiveness in a single sentence. The damage was done. The truth was now out in the open, and no apology could undo it. Rasheeda's response was immediate and cutting. "You lied to me for years," she repeated, the words more forceful now. "You thought you could hide it from me. You thought I wouldn't find out. Well, now you're exposed, and there's no going back." Karlie stood back, watching the scene unfold in front of her. She wasn't here to take sides, but she knew the truth had to come out. It wasn't just about clearing her own conscience. It was about giving Rasheeda the closure she deserved. It was about breaking the cycle of lies that had been allowed to persist for too long. And now, for the first time, the truth was on the table. There was no turning back. The room was heavy with the weight of the truth, and no one knew how to proceed. Some cast members looked away, unsure of how to react. Others, like Bambi, stepped forward, offering quiet words of comfort to Rasheeda. "This is a lot," Bambi whispered, her hand resting gently on Rasheeda's arm. "But you don't have to do this alone." Rasheeda's tear-filled eyes met Bambi's, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she let herself lean into the support of her friends. She had always been the strong one, the one who held everything together. But now, in this moment of vulnerability, she allowed herself to break. And Bambi, ever the loyal friend, stood by her, offering the kind of silent support that spoke volumes. As the tension in the room began to settle, Karlie turned to leave, her job done. She had exposed the truth, and now it was up to everyone else to pick up the pieces. But before she walked away, she turned to Kirk, her voice steady as she spoke. "You need to make things right," she said, her eyes cold. "You need to face the consequences of your actions, not just for Rasheeda, but for everyone you've hurt. And you can't keep running from the truth anymore." Kirk, for once, said nothing in response. He simply stood there, his shoulders heavy with the weight of his own guilt. There were no more words, no more lies to tell. Just silence. The room was still thick with the lingering weight of Karlie's truth bomb. The fallout from the explosive revelation had already begun to spread. And the cast, the crew, and the world outside would never look at Kirk Frost the same way again. What Karlie had unleashed wasn't just about exposing a man's secrets, which is a turning point for everyone involved. It was about trust, betrayal, and what happens when the world you've carefully built is torn apart in front of millions of viewers. Rasheeda, still reeling from the emotional blow, stood outside the set. The reality of what had just unfolded was still sinking in, her mind whirling with disbelief. She had seen Kirk at his worst, but she had never imagined he could go this far. The betrayal felt like a knife to her heart. Her thoughts were clouded, her emotions running high, and she wasn't sure whether to scream, cry, or just walk away from it all. She could still hear the words echoing in her head, the silence that followed Karlie's bombshell, and the look of guilt on Kirk's face. But through the pain, there was also a sense of clarity of liberation. For so long, Rasheeda had fought for her relationship, clinging to the hope that everything would work out. She had convinced herself that love was enough to overcome the past. But now, in the face of the truth, she realized that it wasn't. Love alone couldn't fix the broken trust, couldn't undo the lies. Karlie had given her the one thing she had needed most, the truth. And now, as painful as it was her turn to decide what to do with it. As Rasheeda stood there, grappling with the devastation, Kirk remained inside, surrounded by the remnants of his own failure. The evidence Karlie had laid out before him was undeniable, but the hardest part wasn't just the lies, it was the realization that he had lost everything. The life he had built with Rasheeda, the family they had created, all of it seemed to be slipping through his fingers. The man who had once been so confident, so in control, now seemed small, defeated. He was a man out of excuses, with nothing left but the wreckage of his own choices. But Kirk wasn't ready to give up just yet. He knew that what he had done was unforgivable, but the man in the mirror still clung to the idea that he could somehow make it right. It was a desperate hope, but it was all he had left. He didn't know how to fix the mess he had made, but he was willing to try. He had no idea if Rasheeda would ever look at him the same way again, but he knew that if there was any chance to rebuild what they had, it would start with facing the truth, owning up to his mistakes, and showing her the man he promised to be, all those years ago. Inside the production office, the tension was palpable. The crew had seen many dramatic moments over the years, but this was something different. This wasn't a staged argument or a scripted confrontation. This was raw emotion, the kind of real drama that reality TV thrived on. The producers huddled together, discussing how to handle the fallout. They knew that this episode, this moment, was going to define the season. They also knew that the aftershocks would ripple through the entire cast, changing the dynamic in ways they couldn't predict. Outside, the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the set. The golden light felt surreal against the heaviness in the air, as if the world outside was continuing on while Rasheeda and Kirk's lives hung in the balance. The crew buzzed around, moving quickly to clear the set, but no one spoke much. The weight of what they had just witnessed was too much to ignore. As Rasheeda finally came back to the set, she was joined by her friends Bambi, Mimi, and Spice. They had been with her throughout the entire ordeal, offering quiet support as she processed the truth. The weight of the situation had not been lost on them. They knew that no matter what happened next, Rasheeda's life was about to change. The woman who had always been the pillar of strength was now walking through the most difficult experience of her life. And they weren't going to let her face it alone. "I don't know how to do this anymore," Rasheeda whispered as they sat in a quiet corner. Her voice was shaky, but there was something new in it, something stronger than before. "How do you come back from this? From all the lies?" Bambi reached out and took her hand, her eyes filled with understanding. "One step at a time, sis," she said softly. "It's going to be hard. It's going to take time. But we're here for you. You're not alone." Mimi nodded in agreement, adding, "You've got more strength than you know. You just have to trust yourself." Rasheeda looked down at her hands, still trembling. And for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to feel vulnerable. The walls she had built around herself for so many years were starting to crumble, and though it hurt, there was also a sense of relief. Maybe, just maybe, it was time for her to start putting herself first. Back inside, Kirk stood before the mirror, his face a mask of regret. He had always been able to talk his way out of trouble, to spin his actions into something more acceptable. But now, as he stared at his reflection, he saw a man he barely recognized. The lies had caught up with him, and there was no escaping them. He knew what he had done, and he couldn't change it. But he could try to make amends, if Rasheeda was willing to let him. He wasn't sure what the future held. He wasn't even sure if there was a future for him and Rasheeda anymore. But he had to try. He had to show her that he was willing to do whatever it took to earn back her trust. The next morning, after a restless night, the cast gathered for their confessionals. The producers had decided to film a series of solo interviews with each major player, to capture their thoughts and reactions to the shocking events. Karlie had already given her piece, the truth teller, the one who had exposed the lies, but now it was the other's turn. Rasheeda sat before the camera, her eyes tired but determined. She took a deep breath, her voice steady. I've spent so much time trying to make everything work, but sometimes, the truth is harder to face than the lies. I don't know what's going to happen now, but I can't go back to pretending everything's okay. I've got to face this. For myself, for my kids. I just, ... I don't know if I can ever trust him again. But I know one thing. I'm not going to let this define me. Kirk's confession came next. He was more subdued, his voice quiet and filled with remorse. I've made a lot of mistakes. I've hurt people. Rasheeda ... the woman I love. I don't deserve her forgiveness. But I'm going to work every day to prove I can be better. I'm not asking for a second chance, I'm asking for the chance to show her who I can be. As the confessionals wrapped up, the cast regrouped for a final scene together. The energy had shifted. There was no more pretending, no more games. This was real, and everyone knew it. Rasheeda sat across from Kirk, the tension thick between them, but there was something different now. They weren't just a couple on a reality show, they were two people trying to navigate the wreckage of their own lives. I want to trust you again, Rasheeda said softly, her voice filled with a mixture of pain and hope. But I need you to show me that I can. Kirk nodded, his eyes filled with regret. I will. I promise you that. And in that moment, the world of love and hip-hop, Atlanta felt different. The drama, the pain, the heartbreak, it was all still there, but it was real now. The stakes had never been higher, and no one knew what would happen next. But one thing was certain. Nothing would ever be the same again.